Welcome to the HLTH podcast, a panel discussion on trends and innovations in health and self-care. My name is Christophe Jauquet. I'm the author of the HLTH books and a professional keynote speaker on health, business, and technology. Every week, I discuss with a panel of experts the positive changes that are shaping our health and happiness. And for this discussion, we have a full panel. 3 of your beloved experts in the panel. Calling in from Barcelona is our digital health connector, Aline Noizet.
Hola.
Our American in Paris, medical expert, digital health, Dr. Aditi, Joshi.
Hello, everyone.
From Scotland, but living near Brighton, as you like to say, medical expert in digital innovation as well, Dr. Keith Grimes.
Yeah, afternoon, everybody.
Great. Good to have you back. So, Aditi, we had a conversation already about how health is going, how we like it. We'd love to hear from you. How was it? You've been to Health America and already?
I have. I've been to Vive and Health, and so it's really nice to be here at the first Health Europe. Overall, what I'll say about the differences is that this is much more manageable, much smaller, and it's nice to see all of the European companies come here. You might see some of them at Health in the US, but it isn't obviously full of those people. And I found that I've been able to have meaningful, even if they're short conversations with a lot of different people on what they're working on, because there seems to be time to do that and this investment in trying to meet other people. And so I found that really a welcoming and welcome surprise, actually.
Yeah, I think it's something that I've heard quite a lot here, and is that, I mean, the sessions are great, but we talked so much during the day. We met so many people. It's also, I think somebody else told it during one of the previous podcasts as well, is that there's always food, there's always drinks. You can walk around freely. You always meet people, and that really makes it great. How was it for you today, Aline?
No, it was very good. And to your point, that's something I really like about health. And I found that's what I experienced in the US. You don't have to worry about food because we've been to many conferences when you're hungry, you want food, you want some water, you have to queue, you don't know where to go. And I think that creates stress. But here, no, and you can focus on what matters, like connecting to people, going to sessions. And that makes a really big difference for me.
I think, I double-clicking on all of those things, having food and drink and all the kind of comforts provided does allow you to focus on the people that you're meeting and the things that you're seeing as well. The other thing, and it's a small thing, but it means a great deal, is the availability of places to actually sit down and meet people and do stuff. Number of events, I think in health in the US, when I went there, you couldn't find a seat for love nor money. But here, there's always someone. You don't have to walk a tiny little bit. And if you do want to meet someone, you can find a spot to do it. And so they provided everything that you need to more effortlessly have those meaningful connections. You got the time, you got the people, you're well hydrated, you're well fed, and you got a place to sit and talk. So yeah, bravo for all of that.
I bet you it has to do with the fact that the Americans, and I am American, so I'll say this, we're a country of extremes. So everything has to be 100 or 0. Whereas here, it's Europe, it's balanced. So there's places to sit, food is available, and we can all connect.
And there's still sessions, though. So any sessions in particular you liked at ET, places that you've been, discussions that you've heard?
It's probably my favorite was the Google Chief Health Officer. Google in general Google always has great projects and interesting things to say. And just the fact that she made that bold statement that AI is going to change medicine the way that penicillin changed medicine. It's a bold thing to say, but I also can understand where she's coming from. Technology, though, is moving a lot faster than antibiotics moved and changed things for both positive and very little negative, but some negative. And so we're going to see how that actually changes the entire world. I mean, penicillin changed medicine, but I don't know if it changed the world in that way.
Yeah, I really like the session as well. And I think we talked about it previously on the podcast as well. What I really liked is that the way that she said that it will impact pretty much every part of their business. And in that way, impact many people at many different levels as well.
Yes. And I mean, and the thing is that Google can say that other people cannot, despite how many smaller companies you have, is that they have the data. They have like millions or billions of images and data points to be able to actually tell us what that means. Even about, this must have been 7-8 years ago at South by Southwest, at the time, their chief medical officer was saying something similar about images and looking at retinal images. And just the fact that they've had now 8 more years to take those data points forward. So what she's saying, you want to sit up and listen. She doesn't make those statements very commonly, right? She's a measured person. And so it's interesting, and I'm excited to see what else they're going to publish and talk about.
Another big one that was present during these days was Microsoft. Did you see any sessions or announcements that they did? Me neither. I was a little. They were everywhere, like from an promotional point of view. Every time you opened Avenel, but I was curious to see. I heard somebody talking about Nuance and one of the transcription services that they provide.
Yeah, so Nuance did present. I can't remember the name of the fella from it, but the guy from Nuance came in and he spoke on the first ChatGPT in hospitals, which is a talk I really enjoyed on the first day, and I was very, very much enjoying what he was saying about how do we get people to adopt a technology that is so wide-ranging as generative AI or large language models, and in part it's about making sure that people can use it themselves. And so he was saying things that I already believe, and we need to teach people how to use this to sort of dig beneath the surface. A lot of the time, I find when people say they've used ChatGPT or Copilot, they've kind of bounced off the surface because they've tried a little thing and it worked and they thought that was nice. And then they tried something a bit more complex and it didn't work and they kind of walk away. You do need to know a little bit more to kind of break through that surface. And it was great to hear not one but two of the speakers talking about that. It's interesting you mentioned Microsoft and Nuance. And one of the things I've also seen here about that accelerated pace is about how technologies that, 6-9 months ago seemed like miraculous, like ambient dictation and stuff, are now rapidly moving towards being commoditized out there. There's people offering it for free. Everyone is now thinking, well, what do I do as well as that? So AI might be changing medicine at a rapid pace, but it's changing everything at a rapid pace, even the industry of delivering AI.
But maybe talking about Microsoft, I heard that they are signing an agreement tonight. So we should hear something tomorrow.
Okay.
I don't have more info.
That's it. That's all you got to tell us.
Okay, we need to be careful.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
Allegedly. Aline is always there with the gossip.
Yes.
Lovely. No, and I do agree with the accelerated speed, definitely with AI. The thing is that if you think about it, 18 months ago, I didn't have any Gen AI tool in my day-to-day work. If I look now, I think ChatGPT was down 3 hours a week ago. I was like, oh, how should I organize myself? Because for 3 hours, I cannot use it. And it's been so quickly like being part of my everyday life. And I think even in healthcare, we will see, in compared to any other digital health, we might see a quicker update there as well. Aline, any sessions you've seen in the past days that you really liked?
Yeah, there were 2 sessions today, really. Maybe a quick one on Cure 51. So that's a company from France that launched a few months ago. They're focused on cancer, but different way. What's interesting is that they are focusing on the cancer patients that survived for like cancer that usually don't have a very high survival rate, like
Pancreatic?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Pancreatic cancer. Thank you. And what they're doing, like they're identifying those patients based on collaboration. So they have a network of hospitals that help them identify those patients. They study those patients, and that we help actually other patients with cancer. They want to learn from those survivors. And I think it's a very cool approach. Yeah.
It is an interesting idea, although funnily enough, when you talk about identifying the survivors of cancers as the people to study to identify how to help others, I'm reminded of that common meme that you see online of a Spitfire and where they put the armor on a plane because they're coming back and it had the bullet holes, and the bullet holes were in the wings and in the fuselage, and they thought they should put the armor there. And of course, the bias here was that it was those planes that had been shot in those areas that could make it back versus the ones that were taken down. I mean, that's a very coarse analogy here, so I need to maybe know more about it. But equally, I'm sure there is some features or some characteristic in patients who suffer from rare cancers and luckily or happily survive or go through to remission that could learn. So it'd have been a shame I missed that one. It sounded really good.
It was really good. And there was actually a patient. So he got pancreatic cancer 12 years ago. And I think it was really amazing to hear him. And I was reminded of the strength of the mind, because the guy was saying when he received the diagnostics, he didn't really accept it. Like, he said, no, like, that's just in my mind. And he really thought. And I personally believe of the impact that psychology can have. I saw patients around me that got cancer, and they were so positive. And the survival rate was really high, like up to 7 years, which was really unbelievable. So yeah, I think it was a very inspiring session.
Incredible.
And the second one was?
It was around pilot for startups. So a topic that I'm very interested in. So when startups want to do pilots in hospitals, so we had different hospitals and startups that were sharing best practices. And they really insisted on the importance of startups to dive into the hospitals, to spend time with the clients they want to work with, to understand the organization, to understand the organigram, who's doing what. And something also they said that was very interesting that I took note of is that they said that the most common mistake is actually to focus on the champion in the company. But that guy said you should actually identify the grumpiest person in the hospital and try to win him over. Because you don't really want the person who is already like in, who likes a solution. Talk to that person who doesn't like it, understand why. And I think that was a very good feedback from me.
That's interesting. But I wonder, I feel like there's, most people will say the grumpiest person maybe to get feedback from, but I wouldn't necessarily try to win them over. But maybe take those negative points, at least when I was running programs, I would take those negative points and apply it to those who are on the fence, which is the vast majority of people, and try to address them in that way. Because in some ways, you're not going to, especially in clinical practices or groups of physicians, you're not going to get them to do anything different if they don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of crossing the chasm, and that you're wanting to move across that chasm from the early adopters through to the early mainstream and then the late mainstream, and then you'll never win over the laggards. But I agree, getting the feedback from the people that are volubly pushing back is important, but it's the quiet ones, the ones that are just sitting there waiting for someone else to speak. Engaging with them, you'll be able to pick up some other things too. I suppose you just have to make sure that you take a diverse range of opinions from your end users and not just focus on the noisy ones.
But this reminds me of, I was speaking to someone from Texas Medical Center yesterday on this topic, and I found this interesting about how do you engage and get more people to join in? And so what they do when they have pilots or they have something that's incubating is they will take them to, let's say, their entire group of cardiologists, because they have 38 hospitals or something. But what they actually do is they don't send them to all the chairs or the heads of the department. They find someone in the department who might be younger or who's into innovation and get their feedback, someone who's actually clinically practicing, because they want someone to champion it in a way, but they also want feedback of people who would actually use it. And I found that an interesting approach because a lot of times people don't do that. They take it to the leader of the department, which in many cases, and I will say that I've seen that too, they're not necessarily the right people because they're not doing the ground day-to-day work that can give you the right feedback.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so I like the idea, and definitely pilots are important, and the people that you involve are definitely important. What I do often notice, though, is that after a pilot, a hospital doesn't really know what to do with it, because a pilot is very often done with a low budget. It's like a gesture of the startup, but then it needs to be implemented beyond maybe the favorite ones, and maybe then the input could be interesting to have that grumpy old physician that gives his input. But the challenge is always in healthcare, I think, moving beyond that pilot and making sure that it is established in hospitals. Yeah,
I mean, the problem of pilots, well known amongst anyone out there who's been involved in a pilot or heard about a pilot. But the only thing that I was able to advise when I was working within the NHS and commissioning services, and then now I'm on the other side of this, is that it's very, very important early on to establish, if you're going into a pilot, what are the agreed metrics of success? As in, if I do this, what do we all agree is good evidence that this is working? And what happens next, like getting at least some commitment of what happens next. If I do this, this will happen next. But that's not a guarantee that things will happen next, but going into it without some clarity of where things move on either side is a recipe for some unhappiness.
Yeah, which leads also to the fact that, I mean, the people that we see here are very early adopters and innovators. But how can you make sure that the rest of the hospital follows you? Because even the physicians that we saw, they're pretty innovating and they like it. But we need to convince the others to make sure that these pilots continue to survive.
Well, maybe, health likes to think of maybe trying to do things differently. It might be interesting for health to hold an event inside a hospital, if you could manage such a thing, and make sure that it was very accessible to everyone, patients, non-clinical staff, administrative staff, and clinicians alike. And you don't want to disrupt the flow of what's happening in a hospital, but making clear what's happening in this space and why it's important and what does and doesn't work could be really helpful. Equally, it would expose the attendees here to maybe some of the realities that they might not otherwise see.
True, but you could do that without bringing a bunch of people into the hospital by getting the right people and speak to them, right? And we talk about this all the time, how you need to get clinicians, and this is the point of getting the day-to-day on-the-ground doctors to give input on your startup and on your pilots for that reason, because that's more practical. At Jefferson, we used to run like our design sprints, and we would get like a bunch of different stakeholders, such as patients, patients, designers, people in our startup lab, and investors, as well as clinicians. And that really helped as well, because I think that otherwise you're not going to get the right information for it. Because I think it's going to be really difficult to get an entire audience into a hospital, especially because you're just coming in for a moment in time. You don't really see what actually goes on in all scenarios.
Yeah, and actually in the Netherlands, so we're in the Netherlands, we're in Amsterdam. In the Netherlands, there's this thing called School of Innovation. And it was initiated by Lucien van Engelen, Bart Colette, etc. And they really try to bring innovation to, nurses, etc., everybody in the whole food chain, let's say, of a hospital. I was involved to bring it to Belgium as well. I was one of the speakers there, and it didn't come true because hospitals were not ready to pay to actually motivate their staff, let's say, and be overwhelmed and influenced by the innovation out there. So it remains a challenge for sure.
Maybe something also, I spoke to someone from APHP, the Paris hospitals, and I didn't know, but they actually have an accelerator inside APHP, and it's kind of an in-between between the startups and the hospitals. And I think that's a very useful organism inside an organization, because I've been doing a lot of pilot support between startups and hospitals. And they really need that support to be on the same line, to understand what each other need. Aditi, what you were saying, also to bring the right people in the conversation. But I think that help, that support can really make a difference to make those pilots successful.
Yeah. So, fortunately in the UK, we actually have quite a lot of the hospital trusts building accelerators for that exact purpose. I met a couple of them here, someone from Imperial in London doing just that. And I have some firsthand experience of working as a clinician and having a company on site. So during COVID, I was working in the vaccine clinics, and there was an official solution for us to document everything, and it wasn't terribly good, but there was a company providing an alternative. And so that was brought into place, and we were using it, and they had developers on site. And what was magic about that was that when they were on site, if there was any problems that they had, we were able to get them fixed. I had some real world experience of that during the COVID pandemic, because we were using one of the official solutions for vaccination, which wasn't very good, but we actually had an alternative provider come in and deliver a solution that was much better, but there were still some rough edges on it. But because they were actually in the place with us, watching how we worked, watching the difficulties that we have, they were able to say, what's happening here? Why did this happen? They'd go away and fix it. And later on that afternoon, we'd have an updated user experience and so on. And that turned out to be a fantastic product that helped us a great deal. And it was because they were embedded with us at the same time. Lots of buy-in from the patients. Everyone was happy about that. So more of that would be great.
Super. Talking about startups, there was one startup that won the startup of, what was it, a pitch startup? What was the competition called? I can't remember. Do you remember?
I think it's Startup Pitch, no?
Startup Pitch, it was called, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was, what was the startup again?
Ally Health.
And you know it, right, Keith?
Yes. I know a little bit about them as well. I'd met some of the founders earlier on last year, and then I caught up with them again at this event here. And the two of them, and again, I'm absolutely terrible with names, so someone should find the names in the background. But their product was about helping match practitioners or providers of care to provide care at home. And things have moved on quite substantially. I saw a little bit of their demonstration earlier on. The part that I saw was using integrated route mapping to allow practitioners to be able to sort of allow for these healthcare practitioners to go and visit people at home in a sort of efficient way, meaning that patients will actually get the care that they need or the support that they need. So it was a really, really useful thing because it helped solve a real world problem about matching the supply of care to the demand in the community.
Lovely. And anything you will take away from these days here at Health, Aditi, things you've seen, things you've heard, you think like, oh, this maybe might help me in my job, or maybe I'll pass this on because it was very valuable?
Well, not specifically that, but it occurred to me while I was here and I went to an event that was a workshop about the French digital health market that embarrassingly I have done very little to look into what is going on in France despite living there. And it was a really interesting talk about Pécan, how it's working and how they have one application. And you guys know this about me. It's a very sexy topic to me, is reimbursement and how do you pay for things? Because otherwise, without that, nothing gets built. And the way that they've built this out and the way that they've structured their pathway through the government system and through the payment system is very interesting. And so for me, I think I'm going to spend some time actually learning more about the French ecosystem and connecting more there.
Yeah, because I think they're actually making some great progress, and
Yes.
and they were not the first movers, but I think as third or fourth movers, they're actually making taking some speed, and I think things are moving really well. No, don't agree?
Well, they launched Pécan a year ago, and so far there's only one company that has been validated.
But I have a follow-up question. How many got through DIGA really quickly, right? I don't think it was also very quick. So, and I realize I say this as an American where everything happens very fast, but then we fail fast. Whereas here it's like very measured and slower, and maybe that'll work better. I don't know. We'll see. But
Well, I was talking to someone yesterday who said that there's quite a few in the pipeline, and they should be validated in the coming month.
great.
Yeah, and also I think it's more than just a number of validations. It's really about the mindset, because the fact that it is there, the fact that they put it out, and as far as I understood, because I looked to it from afar, but it is pretty solid. And they even learned from DIGA, they learned from Belgium, and I think it might be helping to change the mentality from all different stakeholders in the healthcare setting in France. And I think that is a major achievement in itself.
But maybe Aditi, for you to dive deeper into the French healthcare system, there's a conference in Paris on July 2nd, DTX France. You should go if you're in Paris.
I'll go. Thank you.
Lovely. Keith, anything wonderful you've seen in the recent days that you want to take along with you?
Oh yeah, there's loads of stuff, but I'm going to move away from AI to two other areas which I think were really interesting. Now, in one of the earlier podcasts, I was talking about how people like talking about AI, but they don't talk about the environmental impact, or rather the sustainability issues about the consumption of power and water. And I was bemoaning the fact here that there was very little sign on the floor about people considering the climate impact of healthcare, which can be very substantial. But then someone got in touch with me, a friend of mine earlier on, said, oh, actually, there is one company. So I want to call it out because this, again, made me happy. It was a company called Ecomedic. And Ecomedic were a small startup that I saw. And the founder told me that what they're trying to do is find an easy way to measure the environmental and resource impact of the entire supply chain for hospital procedures. And they had a dashboard which allowed hospitals to be able to sort of assemble exactly what the costs would be in terms of energy consumption, water usage, and other rare earth metals and so on, find ways of reducing the impacts and the damage in the long term, and make that easy for everyone so they can look at the procedures they have right now and find a way to reduce the impact for them as well. And I thought this was a really positive thing, to add the energy consumption of other technologies in there as well, such as their cloud infrastructure and so on, would be good. But to see someone in there working and having a simple dashboard to allow hospital administrators to start thinking really carefully about how they provide their services in a world where 4.2% of all global greenhouse gases come from healthcare, we really have a large responsibility.
Yeah, I like that. And by the way, for listeners, I mean, we're still recording live from the event. So if you hear noises in the background, it should be filtered out a little bit, but I can imagine that there's not the thunder going on, but there's people still working here around us. Sustainability was lacking, I think, a little bit. Another thing that was mentioned was the AI Act. I don't know, anybody picked up anything on that? It wasn't. Did you hear anything, or did you just also confirm that it wasn't present?
I was talking to people who were talking about it, but I don't think I heard about it in a talk.
Which is remarkable.
Yeah.
I think. The Digital Act as well. I mean, there's nothing really around the whole thing that.
It's one of these things. It's a little bit like the sustainability point that I was making. People are here to talk very positively about the changes and so on, and some of these things might be felt to harsh the buzz a little, and so it was all taken off stage. But the theme that did come across in the areas where they talked about AI or any other technologies was the importance of trust, the importance of making sure that people are compliant with regulations, because unless we get people to trust these technologies, patients, doctors, whoever else, we're not going to be able to deploy them. So there is an appetite for discussing more difficult things on stage. But why the AI Act wasn't done, why sustainability wasn't picked up so much, I don't know.
Any other topic you want to leave us with?
Well, just before coming on here, I went to one of the main stage. I think it was the last main stage presentation. It was about psychedelics. And it was fantastic because they had 3 people on stage. They had Florian Brand from ATAI, Genevieve Justin from the Jerviston Foundation, and Kabir Nath. And what was really interesting about that is they had 2 companies working on the practical application of psychedelics for treating mental health disorders. Psychedelics such as anything from psilocybin, the sort that you find in magic mushrooms, MDMA, commonly known as ecstasy, LSD, DMT, all these drugs that have got a sort of kind of terrible reputation from the persecution or the sort of the work done back in the 60s under the Nixon administration, being really rehabilitated because of their, frankly, quite extraordinary impact on mental health. And we're finding that instead of people having to take SSRIs, antidepressant medications for long periods of time with rather modest impact, in certain circumstances, the use of psychedelics can have very, very profound impact, lasting impact after one dose. Things such as ketamine, which has a license for use in the US, I understand, in certain circumstances. And it's really interesting hearing some of the founders of the companies that are trying to get the medical evidence, the real world evidence, to turn these from alternative therapies into part of the armamentarium of doctors working in this space, allowing us to address treatment-resistant depression, PTSD, OCD, alcoholism. These are bugbears of the mental health world. So it's really, really positive to hear about the work that they're doing there and some successes, but also doing it right, getting the evidence there to allow us to pick this up.
I'm just going to say, though, that the the FDA recently cracked down on the MDMA research. So let's see what happens here. We were a little bit further along, but there's still a lot of distrust on this and a very high level of, there's going to be a high level of need for creating a research. I'm trying to think of the word, but there's going to be, people are not going to trust it very easily. They're not going to.
The other interesting thing, I think you're right, it's about providing the evidence to make people feel comfortable. Then there was the health economic aspect of it as well, because one of the features of using psychedelics is that they can last a long time, but the therapies require a therapist to be present with someone, and quite often it's one-to-one. So if you have a drug that lasts, 6 hours, you can't put people through the treatment very frequently. So there was a lot of interesting discussion about what are the shorter acting ones that can deliver the same effect.
Great. Any other last points that you want to leave us with, or anything you saw?
Maybe I will share with you the 2 words that I will take away from that conference that came back a lot yesterday and today. First one is holistic approach. And that came back in many, many discussions. Now we really want to take the patient as a whole and to include all sides of what's around the patient. So not seeing things like siloed, but really, complete approach to address and take care of the patients.
And was it talk or was it real talk? I mean, did they really, did you see something concrete around it, or was it just buzz?
No, in the different, when we were talking about metabolic disease yesterday, this morning as well, in some session, in the women's health session, I think we're really moving towards, holistic approach, value-based also for me is also linked to that, came back a lot. That's the first word, holistic. And the second one is collaboration. I'm very much into ecosystem. And it came back a lot. And this morning in the session around pilot, I like how they were presenting a pilot as a way to check if a relationship can work for someone. So, when we talk about investors, it's like marriage, you're going to be married to someone for 10 years. And it's actually the same with a pilot. So I like their way of presenting a pilot in that sense. And also insisting on the fact that choose wisely the person you're doing a partnership with or a pilot. So those are my takeaways.
I like it. Any words that you take with you, Aditi? Specific word that you remember?
Actually, one of the words I'll take away is art. There's actually quite a lot there's an art installation here we haven't talked about, but there's an art gallery at the entrance with work produced by healthcare professionals and some famous artists in there as well. And actually seeing art and the non-medical Here, I'm looking out of the window, I can see a games lounge with arcade machines there. I like the fact that they're integrating holistically everyone's lives into this as well, because, we don't come into healthcare and then we don't have to drop everything at the door to do what we do. We have who we are outside this, and there are touches of it throughout with the piano that's been intruding on the podcast and everything else. So yeah, art coming into this was welcome.
Actually, on that, I think that's something that's special for me at Health. So you were talking about art, and they've been doing some art workshops where people were actually like designing. So Agathe, that we had on the podcast before, she participated in that, and she loved it because it was a way for her to mingle with people in a different way, to connect in a different way. And something that I was missing here this year, and I think the art workshop replaced it, is the pets section. So in Las Vegas, they had a section with pets, like with dogs and I think cats. And some of my friends really loved it. Like when they needed a break, a mental break, they were going to see the pets and pet the pets. And for me, the art workshop was doing the same effect here. So that's for me a plus.
Here you could do your hair, I think, and get a massage,
well,
right?
yeah.
So there was quite some things.
Yeah.
Aditi, a word?
So I'm going to say connection comes
I was
back
about to say the same. That's not fair.
Oh, no, you don't get to copy me now, Christophe. But I was going to say, first, for two reasons. One, what I brought up at the beginning, how there's been a lot of opportunity to connect with people and have conversations. But two, as we talk about just technology in general, AI especially, there's been a lot of talk about how and what is going to be the role of us as humans, as physicians, as clinicians, as people who work in healthcare and medicine in general. And I think what is going to be left is that area of connection. And how do we maintain that instead of just having technology take over that? And so that's what I'm going to take away.
Yeah, I was about to say discussion or connection or, collaboration. We talked about it as well. So this is also what I took away from it. Are we coming back next year?
Yes.
Yeah.
All of it? Good. Well, time to wrap up the Health 2000 podcast at the Health Conference in Amsterdam. Thank you for listening. If you like the show, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. I need to change that last sentence, right? I'm always messing that one up. If you like this show, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. You can also visit healthyjasm.com to discover the other episodes, subscribe to the newsletter, and learn more about our panelists. For now, I'd like to thank our panelists for their health enthusiasm. Thank you, Aditi Joshi, Keith Grimes, and Aline Noizet. My name is Christophe Jauquet. We are the Health Enthusiasm panel and would love to see you again next week for some more health enthusiasm. Ciao.